How would you describe that situation?
Yeah, well, this is actually a story that came in from a reader. What happened is I originally published this book as an ebook and then went out to my readers for questions and comments, and I got and for stories, and I got flooded with examples of lies that had been damaging to people's lives. And this kind of lie used to be much more common. It's actually not so common now for doctors to starkly lie to their patients about their condition, but it used to be thought that people couldn't be entrusted with the truth, and you had these ghastly scenes where a person would be dying. This is actually one of these stories comes from my own family. My maternal grandmother, this happened before I was born, had a malignant melanoma, which went on to kill her, but she was told she had arthritis, and she told her kids she had arthritis, and her husband all the while knew she was dying of cancer, and at a certain point she figured out she was dying of cancer but didn't want to tell her husband because she thought he was in the dark and she was sparing his feelings. And so what you had was a year in which she was dying, and no one was talking about it. Everyone was keeping up this brave front that she was just going to get better. And when you think of what doesn't happen in a situation like that, when you think of all the conversations that are not had and the forgiveness that is not shared and the compassion that is not expressed, and I mean, is it really true that my grandmother had nothing to tell my mother to prepare her for her life without her? I'm sure that's not true, except for the fact that to deny the truth is to also not be motivated by the truth. I mean, this is one of the most insidious things about lying. When we lie to people, we rob them of their autonomy. They don't have the information they need to operate in the world in line with what's really going on, and so it's a very arrogant thing to do to other people. But essentially, we're telling them that we're the best judge of how much information they can have about their lives. But we also have to pretend not to be motivated by the truth ourselves. So if you know someone's dying, but you're pretending they're not, you can't say all the things you would want to say if you felt it might be the last time you would see them. So it's very corrosive.
I would make different judgments about different lies that were told in that MS story. Doctor failing to inform the patient of his diagnosis at an early stage like that, when she might do something about it. It was new MS. She was only in her 30s. Egregious. But the patient not telling her elderly mother, very defensible, because it might merely spare her years of worry in her old age with perhaps no upside of knowing.
Right, but it also spares her the opportunity to deepen her relationship with her sick daughter. I mean, that's the thing that people are not calculating, that these are uncomfortable truths to tell, and you think you're sparing somebody anguish, and in some cases you are, but you're also denying them the choice of how they would behave in light of the truth. And I mean, what's interesting is that I mean, these are kind of whopper lies we're talking about, I mean, especially in the case of a doctor not informing a patient of her condition. But one thing that I focus on in the book,
the doctor told the husband of the patient, but
right.
But I still agree with you. That's egregious.
Well, that I think that does not happen anymore. Frankly, I mean, this is something that was happening in the 60s, but I think it's probably illegal now. I don't know, but it was very common in the 60s.
But who are we on the lie to the mother? Who are we to judge? How does the patient know what the more, or how do we know, I should say, what the more loving act toward the mother is? And for that matter, how do we know the mother might not have the kind of personality that would make it harder to be close to her if she knew such a thing?
Well, your question, who are we to judge, is an interesting one, and it actually should be asked first by the person who's tempted to lie. I mean, who are you to judge that this other person can't handle the truth? Who are you to judge that this other person would be better off operating with a misconception about what is going on in their lives? I mean, that's really what you're doing when you lie to someone in cases like this. Now, there are cases where you feel competent to make that judgment. If you're talking about someone who is severely depressed, someone who you're worried may commit suicide if they knew the truth. I've heard from people who have cheated on a husband or a wife, and wanted to come clean and wanted to try to repair the relationship, but had heard from that person that if you ever cheat on me, I would kill myself. And it wasn't just rhetoric. They really thought this person would very likely kill themselves. So these are obviously difficult situations.
Mm-hmm.
And if your honest assessment is that the other person is not fit to handle the truth, either because they're a child or because they're suicidal or otherwise on the brink, well then that could be a compassionate thing to do. But I also focus on the tiny lies that we all tell and everyone around us tells, and we don't tend to notice how corrosive they are. So, for instance, imagine you're out with a friend and he has plans later in the evening with another friend, and he tells you, I don't really feel like going out with Richard. I'm just going to cancel. And he gets on his cell phone and he calls Richard and leaves him a voicemail message. He says, "Hey, Rich, I can't go out tonight. My kid is sick. Let's reschedule." And then he comes back to the conversation with you. Now, that's a story that someone told in the book, where they just witnessed another friend lie with perfect alacrity to a third friend, and reflected on how that actually damaged their relationship, because they just didn't trust this person as much anymore. And there was no reason to even mention it, because they weren't going to admonish their friend about their ethics, because it wasn't that deep a friendship, and the conversation was never had. So the liar in that case has no idea that she, in this case, harmed her relationship. Mm-hmm. But she did, and
collateral damage from telling a lie.
Yeah, and it's the tiniest lie. It's a voicemail message to a third party, but these are the kinds of things we witness around us all the time, and I think we pay a price that is unacknowledged.
Let's take a phone call. Veronica in Scarsdale, you're on WNYC. Hi, Veronica.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. This is a story of a very, very good childhood friend of mine, Clara, and about 9 years ago, her brother, Francis, was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and it was very upsetting. Their mother, Agnes, was 86 years old at the time. This is a family with very good relationships between them, no issues, and I said to Francis, please do not tell her, because there is no reason. First of all, you're getting good care.
And did she tell her?
No.
And you think she did the right thing?
She did the right thing, and there was no lying involved, because not telling doesn't always mean that you are lying.
Aha. And yeah. Veronica, I'm going to leave it there, but Sam Harris, go ahead and react.
That's true. That's a good point, Veronica. There's a distinction between lying and keeping a secret, and there's no. I think we should keep secrets sparingly, because they often entail lies to cover them up, or to avoid divulging the truth. But there's certainly no contradiction between honesty and withholding information. I mean, if I ask you how much money you have in your bank account, the truth is you don't want to tell me and all of your listeners, and so you can say, I don't see why you need that information. I don't feel like talking about it. That's the truth, and that doesn't require you to be completely naked in the face of any possible question. And so, and not.
But isn't
talking...
that exactly what the daughter did in the other story, where she just failed to inform her mother that she went to the doctor and got this MS diagnosis?
Well, generally what happens in these cases is that it entails a commitment to keeping it a secret entails lying about what's actually going on, because the person's not well, but they're making up reasons why they're not well, or they can't do certain things, and they're having to cover with lies. So, yeah, I mean, there are situations where, yes, you just can not volunteer certain true facts,
and you have less of a judgment about that.
Yeah, and that's not. I mean, it's not. This isn't a matter of so much judging other people's lives. This is a matter of seeing the consequences of lies all around me, and seeing how if you want your life to unravel as quickly as possible, there are few better things you can do than just start lying to everyone. I mean, you look at someone like Lance Armstrong, Anthony Weiner or any of these John Edwards, any of these other spectacular flame-outs of careers of late. That lying is really the oil that lubricated that machinery of misbehavior. I mean, you can have a very unconventional life and not be ruined if you tell the truth. The crucial part is in pretending to be someone you're not, and that's, it's a it really is the sin that paves the way for every other sin, whether it's financial frauds or marital infidelities or even various types of violence require lies to be successfully covered up and prosecuted.
Anthony in Fort Lee, you're on WNYC. Hi, Anthony.
Happy Thanksgiving.
And to you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Children, hold your ears. Santa Claus.
Yeah. Actually, that's the most common question I've received from readers.
No kidding.
That's one I answer in the book. It's interesting. I was completely surprised that people were so fixated on that particular lie, and I heard from readers who seemed to anticipate that. I heard from people who felt really harmed by the fact that their parents had lied to them every Christmas. They were, the experience of realizing that the people closest to them had lied year after year and they hadn't been able to detect it was actually destabilizing to them. They actually felt it wasn't. I mean, most of us don't remember what it was like to realize Santa Claus didn't exist.
Then they grow up and do it with their own kids for the same reason, to preserve a little magic of childhood.
A lot of people don't. A lot of people don't, and I certainly don't. I've never been tempted to lie to my daughter about Santa Claus, and she absolutely loves Christmas. And this is the thing that people 364 days a year realize that fiction can be fun and meaningful. I mean, we're not tempted to lie about Harry Potter or Middle Earth or Superman or dragons or anything else that is cool and wonderful for kids to contemplate. And we don't feel that those works of art or forms of entertainment are depreciated by our honesty. I mean, the Halloween, we don't lie about Halloween. We don't say that all of these monsters are really out there, and kids love Halloween. And so it's just an illusion. It's a cultural illusion that we've managed to create for ourselves that Christmas is would be ruined if kids knew the truth about Santa. What they would know is that their parents make a heroic effort to make it as fun as possible for them.
It's too bad about Santa. Hanukkah Harry is real, though. You know that, right?
Yes.
Ellen in Nyack, you're on WNYC. Hi, Ellen.
Hello. Thank you for taking my call. I've been listening to this with a lot of interest. I think there has to be some kind of middle ground, though, because too much lying is bad, but sometimes there is a degree, maybe not of lying, but omission that can be more helpful to people. I know my sister died in her 30s of cancer, and she was given a terminal diagnosis by a very noted doctor who told her she had 6 months to live. And that was just devastating. He might have been thinking at the time that he was being helpful and honest, but in her mind, that was the point.
What would you have had the doctor do?
I would have just said that I would have told him that she had a serious diagnosis, that there was no way to know exactly, what kind of time she had. I would have given her hope, because
right.
she just collapsed. All her hope was gone, and she was a young woman.
Sam Harris, can you thread that needle?
Yeah. Well, this comes down to to figuring out what the truth actually is, because the truth almost certainly was not, you have 6 months to live. I mean, that's just not the way medical information exists in the mind of any doctor who's thinking clearly. I mean, these are statistical estimates of the range of possibilities, and the range is indeed a range with almost any condition apart from a hanging. I mean, so you just know that you don't know on some level how long someone is going to live, whatever the diagnosis. And so I would want the doctor to be honest about that range. Some people live longer, some people go sooner. The average is 6 months, but we actually don't know exactly what will happen in your case. But what you do, if you give a truly open-ended and hopeful and essentially deceptive diagnosis in those cases, is you don't allow the person to do all the things they would want to do if they probably only had 6 months to live. You give them license to operate with the delusion that their life is open-ended in the way it was before they got sick.
So the statistical probability, yes, but well presented.
Yeah, that's the thing. It takes some skill to present the truth. It takes some reflection to really understand what the truth is in many cases. And what I'm not saying is that you have to download every unpleasant fact you know on every topic. Because telling the whole truth about anything is impossible. We are always editing what we say because we'd be talking for 1,000 years on any topic. So you need to say what's true and useful. And if there are certain facts that you think are true but are actually harmful to know, well, then it's not necessarily deceptive to avoid conveying those facts or certainly emphasizing those facts. But it's so there is an editing process. But again, you have to. I think you have to be guided by the golden rule in some sense in these cases, where you should give people the information you would want to have if you were in their situation. And when we're tempted to lie, in almost every case, we're not thinking about what we would want to know in the position of the person we're about to lie to.
Ellen, thank you for your call. We've just got about a minute left with Sam Harris, whose new book is Lying. But would you go out by telling our listeners your customs story from the book when you came back from Asia?
Yeah. You noticed that, did you?
Yeah, it was a little hard to miss.
Right. Well, so this was one thing you discover when you're committed by default to just tell the truth in every situation. One thing you discover is that it's quite a relief because there's nothing to keep track of. You're using reality as your memory in some sense, and you can just keep pointing people back to the world. If you say the wrong thing, you can say, "Oh, that's not quite true. This is what I meant." But when you're lying, you constantly have to calculate what you said yesterday and to whom. But I was going through customs after my first trip to Asia when I was about 20, and the customs officer asked me if I had done any drugs while I was over there. I was in Thailand and India and Nepal, and as it happened, I had done some drugs. I had smoked opium and I'd smoked marijuana, and I had it was an interesting situation because I had no real reason not to lie because I wasn't carrying any drugs. So I was not in jeopardy of going to prison for the truth. And so I said, actually, I did some drugs over there, and we had this very interesting conversation and a very protracted search of my luggage. But the net result was we were both much happier at the end of that conversation. It was because it was a surprising truth I told him. He's not obviously in the habit of hearing people honestly confess their drug use.
How about that?
And
even as a young hippie in 1987, you were a pathological truth teller.
Well, yes, I had. This was an epiphany I had freshman year at Stanford. I took a course with a really brilliant professor named Ronald Howard, who taught a course just on the ethics of truth telling, and it really changed me in a way that courses rarely do.
And what if you were carrying drugs back into the country? Would you have been justified to lie in that case?
Well, yeah. The problem with bad laws is that it tempts otherwise peaceful and honest people to lie in self-defense. So, yeah, I happen to think our drug laws are obscenely unethical. I think the idea that a peaceful, honest person who is using various naturally occurring substances to regulate his states of consciousness, the idea that person could be thrown into some hellhole for decades at a stretch with rapists and murderers, that's just an insane situation. So, yeah, the problem is if you're smoking pot in most states in this country or using some other mind-altering substance, you need to lie to people if, when push comes to shove, to protect yourself. And so, lying in self-defense, I think, is ethically warranted. But that's why we need to get our laws straight. I mean, it's crazy that we have laws where good people basically have to break them because they make no sense.
Sam Harris, his new book is called Lying. Great conversation. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you, Brian.